Hey guys, welcome back. I have another book review for you today, and it is our last true crime book of the month. And this is a pretty famous book. It's like probably one of the most well-known true crime books that I've done, and that is Helter Skelter. This is the story of the Manson family murders and like everything that happened afterwards. It is actually written by the district attorney who prosecuted the case, Vincent Bugliosi. He is the one who got the guilty convictions for Charles Manson, Susan Atkins, Leslie Van Houten, and Patricia Koninkle, and later Tex Watson. So this book kind of starts with the murders and goes all the way through the court hearings, and there is an epilogue. I will go ahead and tell you this is the 1975 version that I have here. So the first version was written in 1974, and if you try to find this book, I doubt that you will find this particular cover just because it's the 1975 edition. And a lot has happened since these convictions in 1975. But I will say I went ahead and gave this book 4 stars. I'm not going to say that I really enjoyed this because I don't feel like it's a book that you really enjoy. And it's pretty dark subject matter, and it's very long. It's very dense. This book is like 650-ish pages with about 100 pages of notes. There are also like 64 pages of black and white photographs of like pretty much everyone involved in the case, and it is written in like 10-point font. I always try to show you guys, and it never really works, but like if you can see like how small the writing is on this page, it's very small. It took a very long time to read. I think I read this on and off for about 10 days, and it was long. um, it was long and it's dense. There's so much information packed into this book. And I kind of was like, when I started, I was like, I know a lot about this. This is not going to be anything new for me. It was all new. There was so much that I didn't know. I will tell you, if you have trouble keeping track of names, there are so many players here, and sometimes it's kind of difficult to keep track of. And there is a thing, he mentions it in this book. So Charles Manson gave his followers new names. So when they were booked into jail, sometimes they weren't booked under their names, they gave fake names. And then he refers to them as those fake names sometimes, and sometimes he refers to them by their real names. So, like, sometimes during the trial, he calls Susan Sadie. That was the name that she was going by at the time, but her name is Susan. And Patricia Krenwinkel was often called Katie because that was the name that she was going by. But so, like, when people are giving testimony, they're using different names, and it's very confusing. But he does have a lot of footnotes in here that kind of explain what's going on. So if you pay attention, you can get it. I kind of believe that this is one of those books that you probably need to read more than once. I think that I need to read it again, but I won't be reading it again right now just because I just finished it, and I think that that would be a lot of work. So we start out with the night of the Tate murders, and we go through the Tate murders, the LaBianca murders, then them catching and releasing the family like over and over until they finally are able to kind of put this together. It kind of makes the LAPD look a little bit incompetent, especially the detectives that were put on the Tate case. They weren't doing things that should have been done. They pressed buttons at the crime scene, like to open the gate, and there were bloody fingerprints on them. And they like pressed the button anyway. A lot of that, the LA Sheriff's Office also told them things like, we have murders that are similar to this, like we have this piece of evidence, blah, 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 and they would totally ignore it. This was in 1969, 1970, so police work was a little bit different. You couldn't get DNA evidence or anything like that. So you could do blood typing, but a lot of the blood wasn't typed or even like tested. I'm not sure why. It said, the coroner and everything give reasons for all the things that they did and that they didn't do. And to them, you can see that they're good reasons. But now, 50 years later, looking at us in 2020, we're like, why wouldn't you do these certain things or whatever? So I think that sometimes it can be frustrating to read this because police work was so different 45 years ago. But you can kind of put yourself there and still think that they're wrong, but understand where they were coming from. Now, this book, like I said, was written 45 years ago, so a lot of things have changed. A lot of things are different now. And that means a lot of things happened after this book was published. I'm sure that the newer editions might have like more things that happened, but I'll just run through them with you really quickly. Charles Manson passed away in 2017. Susan Atkins had brain cancer, passed away in 2009. Vincent Bugliosi, the man who wrote this book, in 2015. And then Charles Manson's lawyer, he was called Karanik, I think is how you say his name, and he actually died this year in September. He was 100 years old. So some of these players are not even around anymore. Charles Manson and Susan Atkins did both die in prison. Leslie Van Houten has been up for parole, I don't even know how many times at this point, and right now there is paperwork on the governor's desk. The parole board has recommended her again. Patricia Kronenkel as well has been up for parole a ton of times and has not gotten out. Tex Watson has also been up for parole and has not gotten out. He's also become an ordained minister, and he wrote a book, as did Susan Atkins, about their time with the family. Who Bobby Bosillo, who they said that maybe he, like they tried to say that the reason they committed these murders was to get him out of jail. He is still in jail, and he also joined the Aryan Brotherhood while he was in jail and had a lot of violations. He was not present at the Tate LaBianca murders. He was already in jail for another murder committed by the family. I actually remember his name not so much from this, but because I read another book called I'm with the Band. It's by Pamela DeBar. Hold on. I have it right here. It's called I'm with the Band. And she met him in Haight Ashbury, like Pamela DeBar did, and mentioned him, and they had like a very small romance. And then she left Haight Ashbury, and she didn't see him again until she saw him on television for committing murder. So thought that was interesting. But yeah, there's all that. And then Squeaky Fromm, who became like the de facto leader of the family after Charles Manson was put in jail. Well, she tried to assassinate President Gerald Ford, and she spent some time in jail, but she's not paroled. Most of them have kind of given up the family. They renounced it. She did not, and there were a couple others that didn't, but for the most part, everyone that's in jail has like kind of renounced the family, and I'm not sure if they ever apologized for what happened or anything else. I never was able to find anything that said that, but they are not like family members anymore. A lot of them seem to have found religion. Like I said, Tex is now an ordained minister. So it's interesting that they have kind of grown from that, but I'm going to walk you really quickly through sort of what happened and I guess through the Helter Skelter motive, the best that I can explain it, because, well, to me, this whole thing reads more like a television show than like something that really happened. It reads like a Hollywood movie, which I guess that happens sometimes, but it's kind of jarring when you like think about it. So basically, they broke into the CeeLo Drive address of Sharon Tate, who was married to Roman Polanski at the time. They were renting the house, and they killed 5 people. Sharon Tate, Jay Sebring, Abigail Folger. I cannot pronounce this other man's name. I'm so sorry. It's like Voltek, but he was Polish. And then Stephen Parent, who happened to be visiting someone in the guest house. And they killed them. Their bodies were found the next day. And then that night, they went just driving around and they murdered Rosemary and I'm drawing a blank. The LaBiancas, they were a couple. Their bodies were found the next day as well. So that is 9 people. And it was a bunch of runaround. No one could really understand what it was. They wrote Helter Skelter and like piggies and political piggies and death to piggies and everything else and rise in blood. But it slowly starts coming out that this was Charles Manson and his followers. And a lot of people were able to tell them what was going on. And basically, I'm going to make this very simple, but like understand that it is not this simple, and it is probably something that if you're really interested in, you should look up. But basically, Helter Skelter was chaos, according to Charles Manson in this book, but it was like a race war, and it was going to be a race war that the white man lost, and there were to be people dead in the streets and everything else. And this was basically going to be like the start of this great war. And Manson and his followers were going to go to the desert, and they were going to live in this like bottomless pit in Death Valley where they would be safe until they could come up and basically rule the world. That is like general, I guess. That's very, very, very basic, but that's kind of the idea. And the reason that he kind of learned about Helter Skelter was because the Beatles were communicating with him through the White Album, most notably in the songs Revolution Number 9 and Helter Skelter. You could take that as you will. They even said that it was a rumor that the defense was going to call John Lennon onto the stand to have him describe what the lyrics of Helter Skelter meant to him, which clearly didn't happen. But it's, I don't know, to me that's just like, it seems very like, what? It just seems so far-fetched to me, and kind of hard to fathom. It also seems really hard to fathom to me that anyone would be like, that sounds like a great idea. Apparently, Charles Manson was very good at reading people. He spent more than half of his life in jail before all of this happened. So he was very good at reading people, and he could kind of be what you needed him to be. Like in your life, he could tell that you were struggling or whatever, or if you told him like I'm struggling, he could be what you needed him to be in order to like kind of get your trust. And then he used drugs in order to like lower inhibitions and make you more susceptible to what he was saying. It has been said by like pretty much everyone that no one was under the influence of drugs the nights of these murders, so they went in very clear-headed, which is even scarier, I think. But they, the Manson family, or these 6 people, I guess 5 people, were eventually found guilty. Charles Manson, Patricia Krenwinkel, and Susan Atkins were found guilty of 7 counts of murder and 1 count of conspiracy to commit murder, given the death penalty. Leslie Van Houten was found guilty of 2 counts of murder, 1 count of conspiracy to commit murder, and given the death penalty. And I could be wrong about Tex because it wasn't put in the book so much, but I think Tex Watson was given 7 counts of murder, 1 conspiracy to commit murder, and given the death penalty. But the death penalty in California was commuted in 1972, which meant that they were all going to spend life in prison. And so far, only 1 person, a man called Clem Grogan, who did not participate in any of these murders, but participated in the murder of a man called Shorty Shea. He got out of prison like 1985. At the time of writing, they had not found Shorty's body. They could not prove that he had been murdered. They were able to locate it in 1977. So that is something that isn't really mentioned here. The girls that were in this trial tried to go on the stand, like they did go on the stand basically against themselves, saying that Linda Caspian, who was the main witness for the prosecution, had masterminded everything and they had just followed her, and the whole thing was to break Bobby Bosello out of jail, which they pretty much poked holes in pretty quickly. But it's so interesting. Charles Manson was basically able to influence these people enough that they were willing to commit murder for him. And they kind of argued that the people who did this were damaged already, and it probably like they would have been okay with that. I'm not going to talk about that because I don't know. I'm not a psychologist. I never read any of their anything. Like I just don't know. But it's so scary to me that someone is able to influence people to the extent that they can say, "Can you go murder someone?" And they say, "Yeah, of course." And I think that's just so creepy. And I think that it's super creepy to read about that. And the whole time they were on trial, like they kept getting kicked out. Every lawyer was given contempt of court at least once. They either paid fines, stayed in jail, sometimes both. Charles Manson and the 3 defendants were often removed from jail, or often removed from the courtroom because they were causing such a disturbance. They all carved X's into their foreheads. They all shaved their heads at one point. Like it was so much. The jury was sequestered for almost a year. So at the time of writing, so like I said, 1974, I'm not sure, I should have looked this up, but at the time of writing, that was the longest time that an American jury had ever been sequestered for a single trial. That might have changed by now. I'm not sure. I should have looked that up, and I am sorry. But they were sequestered for almost a year, over holidays, everything. And then the Judge Older was the name of the judge on the case, and Vincent Bugliosi had 3 bodyguards at the end because they had been getting death threats. It was absolute insanity. So this is an interesting book. I'm definitely not going to say like don't read it, but it is a little bit creepy. Not so much. I don't know. It's just to me, it's just so creepy the way that like things like that can happen. But it's a good book. It's really interesting. He is the one who prosecuted this case. He knew everything. And he talks you through the case. He tells you what he wishes he could have done better, like what the other defense attorneys were doing well at, what they weren't. So it's worth checking out. I'm not sure if it would be better to listen to an audiobook or something. I can't imagine how long an audiobook would be. But yes, I think it's worth checking out. I think that it is a good book. It's well written. It's not like written in legalese because he's a lawyer and he can't understand anything. It's written very easily. It's very easy to understand, but it's very dense. And I do warn you that it is extremely dense. If you think I'm just going to fly through it, like I thought that too and I was wrong. But it is a good book. I'm glad that I read it. But like, wow, it's a lot. Like, look at that. It's thick. So, but that's really all that I had to say about Helter Skelter today, guys. And I hope that you enjoyed it. I'll be back next week with like not true crime. I'm actually ready to take a little break from true crime now because I've read 5 true crime books in the last month and it has been a journey. Bye.